Hello. Hello. Hi, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? Do. Let's quickly grab some headphones.
In this video, I'll show you how to set up and manage live streams in YouTube Live Control Room.
Hello everyone. Can anyone hear me or is currently in the stream? What I'm going to do is wait a few minutes to let people get in. I'll be periodically referring back to Slack to check if people are in or if anyone is having any issues seeing the presentation. We'll also have some time at the end for questions, which I'm going to ask people put in the Slack chat again because, well, certainly when I tried it, at least I couldn't see the messages that were on YouTube. It wasn't letting me send them for some reason. So, are people making their way in? Let's have a quick look now. What's someone saying? I'm in. Perfect. So just seeing that someone's been able to make it into the stream, I'm just going to wait a few minutes to allow people to make their ways in. Can everyone see the screen okay? Can everyone hear me okay? Fantastic. Thanks for that, Anthony. Mustafa, Nadia, much appreciated, everyone. Question. Is anyone having any issues, and do we also know how many people we're expecting in this session? I appreciate it's a little bit of delay. I think it's roughly about 30 seconds, so I'll just give a moment to people to answer that. Cool, so we'll just give it 2 more minutes. So just before 10 past, and then we'll get started with the session. Oh, amazing. Everyone's dead quick to get on that. You'll actually find I asked for a green tick, though, and not a grey one. I'm joking. But, cool. Looks like most people seem to be in here. Cool. Just going to make sure no one's having any issues or anything like that before we do get started. Fantastic. Okay. Cool. All right, let's begin. So, I haven't done one of these sessions for a little while. It's been my colleagues Hannah and Steph that have done a lot of this. I've recently come back for the last couple of months to rejoin the partnerships team. A lot of you may previously known me from doing the onboarding side of things. I'm now heading up the B2B partnerships team in Manchester. What I'll be talking about today is giving you all hopefully the information to make a more informed choice about the type of organisation you'd like to work at after Northcoders. So what I mean by that is specific sectors, sizes of business, what are some of the pros and cons about working in a startup, scale up, large corporate, and answering any of the questions that you may have around these types of businesses, as well as giving examples. I'm also going to have some time at the end of this session as well to answer any questions people might have just more generally about the current industry and basically maybe uncertainties, apprehensions, any information I can share with you to hopefully provide some sort of reassurance around what's going to happen both during the course but also afterwards when you do go into the market. I think one of the great things about being in tech at this point in time is work from home culture is much more established and um, shown to work than a lot of other industries. So hopefully this industry should be somewhat sheltered from some of the negative effects of what is currently going on in the news. But before we jump into that, I'm just going to quickly talk through these slides. What I'll probably do as well is every few slides, just take 30 seconds out to let people ask any questions that they may want to in Slack before moving on. Okay. So yeah, let's get started. Fantastic. So we just included a few statistics about the tech industry across the north. These statistics apply to both Manchester and Leeds. The industry has obviously been growing a lot. That's why there is organisations such as Northcoders and obviously competitor organisations that I'm sure we might all be aware of to some degree as well. And these days, any organisation of a certain size will hire developers, right? So it's not just strictly tech companies you can get roles in after you've graduated the course. Any organisation of a certain size will have some sort of development team. So what we need to ask ourselves is, what does that company look like that we want to work in? Cool. Which is the purpose of this slide. So I'm going to talk about size of organisation and maturity of organisation first, before moving on to examples of companies that are consultancies, agencies, and also internal development teams. Cool. So a startup is generally a company that has been going for typically less than 2 years. I think the number is less than 20 developers, or 20 employees rather. Obviously, there's a little bit of flexibility, but what we're talking about is companies that are new to the market, new idea, and obviously we're going to be thinking about the pros and cons that can come with that. So as you can see on the slide, you generally have a much looser team structure. So it wouldn't be unusual for you to be reporting directly into a director or C-level executive in that organization. There won't be a very tall management structure. It'll be very flat, and often you won't be expected to just be a developer. What I mean by that is you may have to go out and do some degree of business development with companies. So, I was going to say go out and go to events, but that's probably not something we'll be doing in the next few months. But basically, drum up interest, talk to clients and customers about what it is your organization does, perhaps some sort of marketing, design, that sort of stuff. So, if you're the sort of person that is quite interested in learning lots about different sides of a business and operationally how all these different things fit together, it could potentially be a great role for you. If you've got relevant prior experience as well that you think you might be able to leverage in a role like this as well, that will also put you in a great position. Some When we're talking about developer roles in startups, it will very often just be a sort of standard developer role. What I mean by that is you won't specialize too much in one technology, or say something like DevOps or architecture, databases, cloud, that sort of stuff. You'll be expected to work and be comfortable with a range of techs, and any technologies that you haven't used already that you will be doing in this role, there will be an expectation for you to be able to go away and pick up these technologies with minimal support. People will be realistic about the time that it will take you to do that, but it will be sort of more hands-off in terms of the training and development that you get. So you may be given licenses to something like Pluralsight, Front-End Masters, Udemy, and expected to go away, learn a new technology, make a proof of concept or some sort of spike with those technologies, and then be able to implement it within your team and potentially share that knowledge and train up the rest of your team with that information as well. Um, One of the great things about working in a startup is, as I mentioned, you'll be more than just a developer. You will have a say over the direction that that product takes and some sort of input in business level decisions as well. So again, if that's something that's quite interesting to you, there will probably be some opportunity to do that. With obviously doing that comes significant. Sorry about this, Slack stuff keeps coming up. Commitment and responsibility. So it's very much not a role for someone that is looking to just be a 9 to 5 developer, clock in, clock out. There will be expectations, and at times a need for you to perhaps work late, do some additional homework, not just again around learning new languages, but just more sort of how to operate and be successful in a rapidly scaling business. Most of the code you will write will be what we call greenfield code. So what we mean by that is you're not working with existing tech debt or legacy code. It will be new projects and services. You may be working with some external third-party APIs that are legacy, but most of the stuff that you'll be doing in this organization will be brand new. Obviously, one of the risks of working in a startup is there is less assurance both over job security and also the financials of that organization. It'll typically be pre-investor. Generally, when a company has some significant form of investment, they would probably transition over to more of a scale-up or SME, which is what we'll talk about in a moment. But one of the questions that is always worth asking in a startup is what is their runway? So what I mean by that is how much money do they currently have in the bank? How much funding is there available? And should they continue operating how they currently are, so a similar number of customers? So I suppose the pessimistic view, how many months can they continue to operate on that current financial structure? One thing to consider as well is, I mentioned this before, but yeah, there will probably be less training and less support. There may be less of a defined career path. There'll be a lot of opportunities for you to grow in both seniority and experience with the company, but it will kind of be up to you to determine what that growth looks like, and um, be confident and assertive in sort of taking responsibilities on and potentially more managerial stuff as the company grows. Initially, you may have slightly lower salaries in the startup, but there may be opportunities for equity in the business. So what you may be offered is, say, I don't know, X percent of the organization in return for a lower salary. So obviously, if you do end up getting investors and you do end up selling your stake in the organization, fantastic. What you'll notice in a lot of the contracts that do talk about equity is you will need to be there for a minimum amount of time, and there may be certain people or organizations that you can or can't sell those shares to, or times when you can and can't sell them as well. So all stuff to think about. But yeah, no, it very much fits the person that has that entrepreneurial mindset, is looking for a company that they can shape and be a part of that growth, and is quite happy going away and defining what that looks like. Cool. So before answering questions, just going to give you some examples of startups that Northcoders work with. So you see a couple on there that are based in Leeds and a couple that are based in Manchester. AeroCloud, I know someone that worked at AeroCloud when they just finished the course, really enjoyed it. They got some opportunities to go to the US and some big airport conferences. It's basically software designed to manage small to medium-sized airports. So everything from logging in flights, access to the runway, from places like shops, supplies, providing customers and people attending the airport information about things like parking, offers, notifying them if there's going to be any delays in their flights, all that sort of stuff. Cool. I think it's full stack JavaScript. I'm not too familiar with the other three. I have spoken to Snap and actually brought them on board when they did join us in Leeds as a hiring partner. But it's been a long time since I've spoken to them. Well worth having a look at their webpage, and I would say that about any of these companies. Cool. So I'm just going to quickly switch over to Slack and see if there's any questions, okay? Cool. So I'm just going to wait 30 seconds because I think there's a little bit of a delay, and then answer any questions that are there. If not, we'll just jump straight back into the slides. Just set a timer. Hi, Judith. Yes, all of these companies have previously hired from Northcoders directly as well. I think AeroCloud have hired, I think, two Northcoders, and I think they are currently in the process of interviewing someone as well. Um, Sign Up, I think, have hired three. I'm not too sure about the other two. Cool. Any other questions? Or shall I move on? Just another 5-10 seconds, and then I'll move on with the slides. Cool. There will be time at the end as well to ask questions, obviously about what we've talked about in the presentation, but more generally about the recruitment industry at this point in time. So if you don't get a chance to have your question answered now, feel free to ask again at the end, okay? Cheers. All right, so moving on. So, as mentioned, the next stage after a company um, scales up from a startup, well, it's in the name there. Yeah, they become either a scale up or an SME, so small to medium enterprise. Cool. So once a company starts getting to that size, and I would say a Northcoders is probably a good example of an SME, you end up having to start define formal structure and chain of command. So the managerial structure becomes slightly less flat, and you'll have more sort of middle management, team leads, senior developers, that sort of stuff that you would find a junior would report into instead of the CTO or maybe technical director. Um, with that obviously comes a more defined career path. So things like training will start to get talked about and defined. Who knows, they may even work with Northcoders or someone similar to help build that training and deliver it, not too dissimilar to the dev lab stuff that we could do already. There will also be career progression. So there might be different pay bands, different levels of seniority, and there will be conversations that you have with your line manager about I suppose, the key performance indicators that you need to hit and consistently hit in order to, I guess, ascend those different levels of seniority. They'll start feeling some of the pains that are associated with being in a growing company. So it's a careful balancing act between structure and hiring people while still trying to grow and still, I suppose, have that startup culture and hunger. You will start seeing departments being more clearly defined. So we've got obviously sales, support, development, and marketing here. You might also have operations, customer service, depending on the organization. So you'll probably find in an organization like this, you will just be a developer. Again, you may be asked to attend events, conferences, that sort of stuff. Maybe along with people in the sales team, but yeah, your day job will be just being a developer. You will probably be going into more specialized roles, so you'll no longer just be a full stack developer. You might end up being a front end developer, back end developer, web developer. It's unlikely you would just be using just one technology or language, but you might find instead of having to do the architecture and DevOps side of things as well, you are just writing code to run on that architecture, if that makes sense. And there will be some code that's been written before you get there. So you may find the organization has been, let's say, anywhere between 2 to 5 years. So there is older code that you currently have to work with. An example would be JavaScript. You might find it's a slightly older version of ECMAScript, and you have to obviously write code that's going to be compatible with that. If we write our code in and silo this stuff in microservices, we can sort of mitigate the impact that sort of stuff happens. But again, that really depends on the structure and the product as well. Cool. In terms of training, I did briefly touch on that, but you will be looking at a more clearly defined training plan. They'll probably have a onboarding process that they use when people join their company. So obviously, we've all done full stack JavaScript. You may be going into a role where you're a Java developer, PHP, C Sharp.net. In fact, more North Coast graduates will go into roles where they don't use JavaScript than they do. It's just the nature of the industry, right? If one programming language solved all the world's problems, there wouldn't be multiple programming languages, right? About 30% of our graduates use JavaScript in their day job. Um, so yeah, how do we? And this doesn't just go for North Coast graduates, but university graduates as well. How do we help people transition over from whatever they were using before they joined the company to the tech stack that we've chosen to use as an organization? So they'll have some sort of onboarding plan. You'll probably be doing some mentoring, shadowing with a senior developer there, maybe doing some testing to get started with, familiar with the code base, working on some smaller projects, and getting familiar with their workflow. There'll probably be a lot of pair programming or team programming in that time. They'll often have a skills matrix as well. iVendy, which you can see in the middle of the screen, is a really good example of a company that has this skills matrix. They've had really strong retention. I think they've hired, it's in excess of 10 North Codes at this point. They managed to keep every single one, simply just because they provide really good high quality training. They have a developer who works there full time planning this training out. And there's obviously budget that you get allocated that you can use for online services, training platforms, but also conferences and that sort of stuff as well. We work with a range of these organizations that you see on this slide to deliver our DevLab sessions. If you're not familiar with what they are, they're basically 5 one-day sessions that we sit down and define with our hiring partners, effectively create a curriculum to address at a high level the skills that developers need when going into these companies. And you will have a lecture, not too dissimilar to what you currently do at Northcoders, and then have a sprint built around those lectures. So there may be an expectation that you do some code before and after the day session, but there will be time in your job to do that. So you shouldn't have to do that in the evenings. But the ones that we currently have running are, I think it's cloud development and architecture. So the focus is primarily AWS, but a lot of the principles like Docker, containerization, we spoke about microservices, will apply to both Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure. And we also do an advanced testing course as well. And we're constantly adding to these curriculi, I don't know. And yeah, writing new ones with input from hiring partners. So to answer the question Judah asked previously about this group of companies again, yes, they're all companies we've worked with at Northcoders, and I can all attest for them for being good companies as well to be a junior developer at. Cool. So just like with the previous type of organisation, I'm just going to take 30 seconds here to break, let people ask questions before I continue, okay? Oh, and just quickly as well, you generally find as well these organisations probably have a little bit more funding. They're probably taking some external investment on from a venture capital firm, so they will be a little bit more secure in terms of funding and have a more established client/customer base as well. So a little bit more job security. What I'll do as well is once I've answered these questions, I will take a moment just to hold on that screen with the example companies on. And again, I encourage you to have a look at their websites, have a look at the technologies that they use, the company's values, and the different sectors that they're in. No two companies that you'll see on there are in the same sector. So it will help you, again, start building a more informed opinion about the type of company you see yourself working at afterwards. Hi Josh, you mentioned Ivendi's good retention. Do you have a percent of what the overall retention is with hiring partners? That's actually a really good question. Um, I believe the average time someone stays with a hiring partner after graduating Northcoders is 14 months. So any company that is, well, not any, but a lot of companies that have had someone for that amount of time has probably seen that person move on. And often the feedback that people have when they do move is, again, that the organization that they work with didn't have the training or support that they needed to, or they wanted perhaps to progress to the next level um, in that company. Speaking anecdotally about my housemate, who's also a developer, his previous role, he wasn't working with a North Coders hiring partner, but he was working with a consultancy who basically have a tiered structure in terms of how you get to, say, mid-level, senior level, architect, lead, that sort of stuff, right? Um, and he never felt there was either the time or the support to actually get through the reading list, sort of hit the check boxes that they needed um, to get to that level. So what I would always ask, and this applies to both hiring partners and non-hiring partner companies as well, is in an interview what their training program is, how people progress up the ranks, and if there is a budget there to either attend conferences, use online courses, or even a professional training provider such as Northcoders. One of the reasons we have started doing the DevLab stuff is for that very reason. Not only does it benefit people that work as junior developers, but also the companies they're working for in terms of retaining those people and keeping their employees happy as well. Um, but yeah, some companies are better than others. Ivendi has a 100% retention record. Looking at these guys as well, I think Access Pay have had 12 and they've lost one, who went on to be a lead developer. I think it was either 4 or 5 years after graduating Northcoders. He was on one of the very first cohorts. First Stock Group got fantastic retention. Not too sure about Spare Room. I did speak to them when we had the campus launch the other week, but I've not had a chance to follow up with them because, well, obviously everything that's been happening in the news recently. Um, Not too sure about Peak either. But yeah, just do a little bit of your own research, I would suggest as well. Have a look on LinkedIn, see who's currently there, see who's maybe second degree connection, people that you might already know. And yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to North Coast graduates and ask what their experience has been at certain companies as well. Cool. Any more questions before we move on? Okay, thank you, Mustafa, for your question. Perfect. Okay, so moving on. Okay, we have obviously after this, well, larger organizations that you may see. I'm sure we're all going to be familiar with many of the names that we see on the following slides. But yeah, large corporates. So when you get to a company of that sort of size and maturity, you are going to have very clearly defined roles and responsibilities within that organization. The type of developer role you'll be going into will be very clearly defined. So you'll probably be something like a web developer, Java developer, um, software engineer, mobile developer, and there will also be very clearly defined promotion paths within that organization. So they will have either a learning development manager or perhaps even learning and development team, got there in the end, who will basically build a curriculum, either just by themselves or with the support of an organization like Northcoders, to basically say, okay, so this is all the training that you have to do within the first 12 months of being at this organization to be signed off, let's say, as an associate developer or a junior developer. Okay, and then maybe 2, 3 years down the line, this is how you become a mid-level developer, senior, lead, that sort of stuff as well. So they might have some bespoke custom materials that they've created to do that. And more often than not as well, they will also work with training providers, both online or otherwise, to deliver content, maybe like AWS, that sort of stuff. Obviously, in a larger organization, there comes more bureaucracy in terms of understanding who can give the green light on a project, do things perhaps like code reviews, or I guess merge into, say, a master branch of a project. There could be multiple teams working on the same features. This stuff can often take a little bit longer and when stuff goes wrong, because in any organization stuff will occasionally go wrong, it may be a little bit trickier to resolve that. Um, you'll often find there will be multiple teams, as I said, but also multiple projects going on within that company. And you may find certain services, like for example, in a bank such as Barclays, will have their own sort of high-level development teams for each of those services, and then you'll have smaller teams under them working on features. So you might find there's an online banking feature, mobile banking, corporate, mortgages, life insurance, all that sort of stuff. Very often when companies have onboarding, and there will be very clear onboarding programs in all these organizations, which is great. There'll be an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with each of these business units or teams, so you can get a sort of a better high level of what the organization does and what other teams are currently doing, how all these things interact. And so what some companies will do is they'll actually give you the opportunity to have a go in each of these teams for a few months. And then at the end of the program, so the first 12 months, allow you to decide what team you think you will fit best in and enjoy the most as well. Again, different technologies, different services. There may be some roles where you do more architecture, so more sort of like Amazon Web Services, something like that, and DevOps as well. Um, yeah, cool. Like I said, really clear onboarding and training processes in these companies as well. So if you're the sort of person that craves a little bit more structure and a little bit maybe more of a supportive environment to um, do your learning and development in, a corporate may be beneficial. Typically as well, you'll talk about funding. They'll be much more secure. There will be a very established customer base, but with that also comes a lot of legacy code as well. So you may find you're either dealing with a lot of very old, I hate to say it, but slightly messy code, or indeed perhaps having to write in a slightly older version of a programming language. I know someone, again, from when I did the course, believe it or not, 3 years ago, who was working in a company where they were having to write code for Salesforce applications. I think it was like ECMAScript 5 or something like that. So it was before even const let and a load of other features that we take for advantage in JavaScript. So I mean that's not that common. That's something that will happen, but again, it's well worth asking, during an interview about what the training looks like, what programming languages and code that they currently use, and if they are using any sort of legacy code, how do they maybe plan to transition away from that, or any future code that they do write will be more maintainable and up to date. Cool. But I guess maybe one of the benefits about working in a very old, antiquated coding language is there's good money that comes to that. I've been to a lot of events and people have been talking about COBOL, which is what a lot of the old banking code is written in. As a often joke, where it's really hard to find anyone that can program some COBOL, but obviously high wages come with that as well. Anyway, going off track a little bit. Give you some examples of the companies that we work with that are large corporates. We mentioned Barclays. A lot of you, I'm sure, were in for the Jaguar Land Rover presentation the other week as well. Unfortunately, the role that Paul was mentioning that might come around before April didn't transpire. Again, with any large company, there is some degree of politics going on there. So that may have and probably did play a part. All these companies you've probably heard of, AO, so they're based out, they say Salford, but it's literally across the bridge. It's very close to the city centre, and I think Salford Central train station. Money Supermarket are based in the city centre, BBC's out in Media City, Auto Trader again is in the city centre. So all of these have taken on Northcoders graduates previously, and obviously hire a lot of developers, including junior. What you find a lot of these companies as well, they'll have very specific times in the year that they look on at taking on junior/graduate developers, because they'll have a graduate program where they do a lot of the onboarding stuff that I spoke about a moment ago in terms of moving people around the organization and assuring they have learning and development materials in place to effectively onboard them. Cool. All right, so yeah, again, encourage you to do a bit of research about these companies, have a look at what technologies they do, what projects. A lot of them will actually have development blogs as well. So I know BBC have an engineering and UX blog that's really good. Many a moon ago, I read a very good article from I think it was the head of user experience design at the BBC about how they designed things like BBC Sounds, why they made BBC Sounds to upset obviously a lot of people, but also just like the general website, why things are the way they are, and how they have consistent branding across them. Cool. So yeah, just going to switch back over to Slack for a few moments to answer any questions people might have. It's a little bit strange streaming. I'm not used to talking to myself quite as much. I appreciate obviously people are watching me, but it's a bit weird having a conversation with yourself. Which of these three is the most popular choice among graduates? Good question, Norbert. Right. Appreciate there's a couple of sort of questions going on in there. I'm just going to quickly have a look back at these to refresh myself. Out of these companies, I know Jaguar Land Rover and the BBC have been the most popular, with Northcoders juniors, so people coming just out of the course. What I would say is when you're talking to these companies, and if they are taking on a sort of junior level developers, ask them what their training support structure is like. I know Jaguar have a really good support structure, and there's an opportunity to jump straight into and be trusted with a lot of the code when you do join our organisation. And I know the BBC has got a really good internal academy, almost like a boot camp, where they help upskill people. Not as familiar with Auto Trader, Money Supermarket, and AO's training. I know Money Supermarket at one point were big advocates of Vue. I don't know if that's still the case. They did at one point hold the Vue.js meetup. And I think they do still occasionally run it in their office. So again, I'm not going to suggest for a moment that people do attend meetups at this current point in time, but once the world does return to some degree of normality, it's well worth going to the meetups that a lot of these companies hire, because inevitably they're looking to hire people, and that's why they're doing a meetup and hosting it. But also it's a good opportunity to pick the brains of people that work at those organizations and have a look around the offices as well. Do you have a place where you list all available roles currently? Yes, so we have an internal job board. Any organisations that have come directly to us and said they are looking to hire, we will post the job on that board. It's not an exhaustive list, so just because BBC don't have, or for example, let's go back. Maybe it's terrible. Jaguar Land Rover don't have a role on that board. Oh dear. It was all going so well, wasn't it? Just because they don't have a role on our board doesn't necessarily mean they're hiring. For example, a company like the BBC will probably have 20, 30 internal recruiters specialising just in technology. We can't have a relationship with all 20, 30 people because, there's only so many me's, right? So yeah, don't just go on that list. What I would encourage you to do is go out and do a little bit of research as well in your own time, and just apply to as many companies that you see that you think will be a good fit for you as well. Obviously, a lot of these companies will probably have Northcoders graduates working at them. I think we have over 600 people that have graduated the course at this point as well. So have a look, see if there is anyone that's done the course, have a chat with them about their experiences, and if they can maybe point you in the right direction to the person that you need to speak to. Any big companies that have their hiring period coming up, and have you spoken to any companies about whether they'll be hiring remotely? Cool. So yeah, I'm going to move on to the whole remote hiring question at the end, because I've got a few bits and pieces that I want to talk about in terms of how things will be looking going forward. I'm sure companies will be looking to hire even junior developers remotely, because that's just the way the world is going to be for the next few months. A lot of companies would have probably had some hiring coming up. So obviously we're moving up to April, which is the end of the tax year for a lot of companies. These things may be put on hold, at least for the short term. I anticipate a lot of companies will probably be delaying their recruitment for maybe a month or two, just to basically see what happens in the world. But similarly, a lot of companies won't. Very often hiring in software development is project based. So they have a project that they need to deliver. There's already a client or a customer lined up for this product. So the show must go on, right? But yeah, happy to obviously have a look after this and in this channel give you a slightly more comprehensive answer. With regards to the job board, Norbert, I'm not sure exactly when you get access to that. I believe it's in project phase, and you'll do a session with either Steph or Hannah, very similar to this, where they will walk through that job board, talk in a little bit more detail about each of those companies, maybe people who have come from Northcoders and gone over to those companies, what their experience has been like. Again, helping you make a more informed choice about whether or not those organizations seem like a good fit for you, if that makes sense. Cool. All right. So, like I said, I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about exactly what companies we've spoken to have said about coronavirus and how it's going to impact their recruitment. But yeah, in very short, a lot of companies have said to us that they are still going to need to hire people, and they're currently sort of thinking about how that is going to happen. Cool. Okay, so I saw someone was typing. Um, any more questions? I'm just going to give them 30 seconds. All right, cool. Looks like there isn't at this current point, so I'm gonna move on to the next part of the slides. I'm gonna try and move a little bit quicker, so there's a bit of time as well at the end to answer any sort of more general recruitment questions that people might have. Okay, so as I mentioned, the type of development work that you can go into after the course roughly falls into three different categories. So we have agency, consultancy, and also internal. So what we're talking about is the type of code that you're writing and who it's for. So when you're working in agency, you're basically working in a company where, let's say, one of the large organizations we mentioned previously, like an AO, will outsource some degree of their development work to a company that specializes in a certain field. So obviously in Manchester, there's a lot of e-commerce. You have a lot of obviously fast fashion companies, and we've mentioned AO as well as another big one. So there is a lot of agencies that specialize in e-commerce. So things like PHP, WordPress, Shopify, all that sort of stuff. You'll often find, especially with smaller e-commerce companies, their primary product is clothes or let's say food or electronics, not code. So they will outsource some degree of that development work to agencies. They'll typically pitch against each other to these businesses for a contract where they deliver something. Often it will be to a deadline. Sometimes companies may go out to external agencies and ask for support because they're behind deadline and they need to deliver to a certain date. So they'll basically get as many hands as possible to help them do that. One of the cool things about working in an agency is obviously there's the opportunity to work with different clients and products while you are on a campaign. So if you are the sort of person that's maybe interested in getting familiar with different sectors, different businesses, and to some degree different technologies, you'll probably have a primary language, but there may be different architectures, servers that this code is running on. It's an interesting option for you. You may be, well, probably not right now, but be in-house with a tech team, so you'll go across to their office and work on code alongside them, but very often you will be working either at the agency's office or just remotely, and you'll sort of do daily call-ins with that team, stand-ups, find out how people are getting on, talk about the work that you'll be doing today, maybe what you did yesterday, what went well, what could have gone better, and there will be some degree of interaction that you'll have to do with external stakeholders. So maybe client-facing presentations. As I mentioned, you'll need to call in to stand-ups, and you may be involved to some degree of that initial sales process. So talking about previous clients that you've worked with and your technical expertise as well. So if that's something that you're obviously interested in doing, it's well worth considering. To give an example of some of the companies that we work with that we classify as agencies, a few of them are just here. So Degree 53 are an agency that specialise in gaming and gambling. I think they were initially spun out of one of the big gambling houses that are based up here in the Northwest as like a special development team for them, but they've got on since to work with a range of different clients. I think they've taken on about 4 to 5 Northcoders previously. Um, Not too sure about Isotoma on Technica. I know Academy are mobile specialists. They're based out in, I think it's either Salford or Media City. They recently took on a big batch of Northcoders graduates. Got a very highly regarded training program there. And Silverchip are an agency that specialise in, I think it's C#.net, but they've since broadened to do some stuff with React, JavaScript, among other languages. In fact, one of the people that I did the course with when I learned to code went across to work at Silverchip, and he actually ended up running like a mini internal academy to get a lot of their developers up to speed with JavaScript and React. So, I mean, who knows? There's, you may end up going in and teaching other people and sharing your expertise with them. Cool. Okay. I'm going to go through all the different types of companies first before we stop for questions. I'm just going to hold on this slide for a moment just so people can have a look at the different names here. Again, I encourage you to have a bit of a read about these companies, have a look. Who knows? You may even find one or two of them are have just put a job spec up in the last couple of days as well and are looking to hire. So, yeah, go out and do your research. Cool. Moving on to the next type of company, we're going to talk consultancy. So consultancy is somewhere quite similar to an agency, but instead of just being, I suppose, an extra pair of hands that supports with delivering a project, it's your knowledge that that company is, or rather your organization's knowledge and expertise that they're being taken on to share and educate another company with. So you will more often than not go in on site. Again, that's probably changed very recently, but yeah, traditionally you would go on site with the client and then you would help them with the way they work. A lot of the time with consultancy, you are going into organizations where there is a fundamental issue with the way that they're currently doing something. I know I can think of a couple of consultancies that specialize in public sector and help them do things in a more modern, contemporary way. We also have ones that specialize in things like automation, digital transformation, that sort of stuff. So yeah, it will very often be part of delivering a larger scale project as well. So it's not just delivering to a deadline, it's about maybe being part of a larger 2-3 year project. It's unlikely you'll be at that organization for the entire 2-3 years, but some of these companies, yeah, you may be there for the entire time. It really depends. Yeah, there'll be lots of travel associated with this. A couple of my good friends work at ThoughtWorks, and they were having to go down to, I think it was Bristol, and they were having to go 5 days a week. So they were traveling down, getting the train Monday morning, staying in a hotel for 5 nights, coming back on a Friday. So if you're the sort of person that is a bit of a, I suppose, a homebody or doesn't like traveling much, it's probably not going to be the role for you. Often as well, companies will decide that they want a different set of developers or they want to scale back the amount of work that they're doing with consultancy at a moment's notice. So, you could be asked to come back to head office and be what we call on the beach. So not currently working with a client with less than a week's notice. And the same goes for projects. So you may be offered the opportunity to go work with a client, very short notice. Different consultancies handle this differently. I know some consultancies will basically just say, this is the company you're working with. Some will almost like have like an internal job board of the different companies they're working with as consultants, and you have to essentially pitch to someone in HR about why you think you should be put on that job. So yeah, there's no one way companies do this, but yeah, you will have to do some degree of client-facing presentations and yeah, consultancy. That's what it's all about. It's about talking to people, picking their brains, and selling a solution back to them and educating them about a better way of doing things. Cool. Let's give you an example of some of the consultancies that we've worked with or Northcoders have since gone on to work at. There's a list just here. So ThoughtWorks, obviously a big international consultancy, very highly regarded. There's often a lot of opportunity for travel internationally with these roles as well. One of my friends who works at ThoughtWorks, she's since gone to live in Barcelona and work at their Barcelona office and is having a great time over there. They specialize in digital transformation, equal experts. their sort of unique selling point is I think everyone who works there has a minimum number of years experience. So you're getting people that are experts in their field. Um, and digital, I believe, specialize in .NET consultancy and BJSS. I'm not sure what they specialize in. I know they're based in both Manchester and Leeds. Same with Infinity Works. They've worked in Leeds for a long time. They've recently, last couple of years, moved into Manchester and scaled up that team quite a lot. They seem to be doing some cool stuff with clients. Not too sure what they specialize in though. Cool. So again, just take a moment to soak that in. I encourage you to have a look at these companies. They're all quite large organizations, so they're quite active on social media. They have blogs. A lot of their consultants will go out to talk at events and share expertise based on what they've been doing. With a little bit of creative thinking, you can often work out perhaps who these clients are based on the local area as well. Cool. Okay, and yeah, obviously the third one is internal development teams. So basically, your likes of your AOs, your BBCs, where you're going into a company and you're working every single day on the same project on behalf of the company that you're employed by. So there's a lot of opportunity to become very specialized within a certain tech stack, technology. As you mentioned, there's probably more formal training based around that, and you are with the same people and working from the same office, so a bit more structure as well. Cool. Okay, so questions. We'll start with questions specifically about the presentation, and then once people feel they've had all those questions answered, we'll move on to questions more generally about recruitment, tech, and coronavirus. Okay. How did that go, by the way? Was that all okay? Could people hear me? There wasn't too much background noise. It's the first time I've done something like this, so it'd be great to hear about anything that I could potentially do better. Apologies, I've been breathing heavily as well. I've got a bit of a blocked nose. Mine's knocked out for some of it, so I missed some of the slides. I'm happy to share those slides with you, Conway. In fact, what I would suggest might be better if you want to send me a direct message after this and just say which bits you perhaps even missed or the bits that you know you definitely did see. I can work backwards and determine obviously the bits that you missed, share a quick summary of what I spoke about, and also the companies as well. So yeah, just DM me a little bit of a reminder afterwards, and I can make sure that happens. No problem, no problem. Like I said, reminder, please. As I'm sure you can probably imagine, it's been an exceptionally busy time in Northcoders in terms of trying to make sure this stuff goes as smooth as possible, but also, I guess, consulting with hiring partners about how they can continue operating as normally as possible based on advice experience that we've got from doing stuff remotely. Cool. Any other questions about the slides, the tech scene, types of organizations, sectors, anything like that? One thing I would like to say is, at the end of the day, I assume the reason a lot of people chose the Northcoders is invariably they didn't enjoy the roles they were doing before they joined us here. So I would really encourage people to think carefully about the type of company that they want to go and work at afterwards, and make sure that you are selecting or perhaps maybe not selecting companies for the right reasons as well. I would say it's much more important, certainly in your first job as a developer, instead of saying, I maybe want to just work for companies in the city centre because I like going out in the northern quarter. Really spend your time actually speaking to companies, both internal recruiters, developers that are hiring, but also maybe more junior developers or perhaps even Northcoders grads that are at those organizations and pick their brains about what's good at working at those companies, what maybe could be better, and understand what you're looking for in terms of training and development so you can continue the journey that you started at Northcoders, learning and doing something that you enjoy. So yeah, pick companies for the right reasons as well, and give them the chance to pitch themselves. It's impossible. We can all have an assumption about maybe what companies like to work at, but without actually talking to someone that is working there every single day, it's impossible to say, right? We might have preconceptions about certain programming languages, but without actually talking to someone that does that every single day as a job, it's hard to say, isn't it? And Slapbot interrupted. But yeah, and don't be dismissive about the work people do as well, right? At the end of the day, you might not like Python, and maybe you've done code before in Python, but yeah, whoever does that in that company probably enjoys it. So yeah, be considerate. Cool. Any other questions? I'm assuming this one under Slackbot probably isn't, but no. Cool. Do people have any more questions? I'm sure you all do because we're not living in a hole. People have been watching the news about recruitment, employability, and everything that's going on in the world with coronavirus. I've been asked to obviously put together a bit about how it might affect recruitment, and obviously I've been chatting to a lot of companies about what their plans are, how it's impacting them. So yes, ask away, please. Lots of questions. Good, good. So, what can you tell us that you think is important to know at this stage? Um, I think it's what I always encourage people to do when they finish this course is not to be selective about things like programming languages and to have an open mind. What I would suggest is if you do go away and learn a new programming language, have a reason that you did that, right? So, say for example, if you wanted to go away and learn TypeScript, say I wanted to go away and learn TypeScript because I wanted to create this React project and I wanted some sort of type validation because of reasons A, B, and C, right? And anything that you do go away and learn, actually make something with it. I can't tell you the number of people I know who have gone away and tried to learn additional programming languages outside of their work, not actually made something with it, and the information's gone as quickly out of their head as it did go in the first place. But yeah, just have an open mind. I would say go to events, but obviously that is probably terrible advice at this point in time. Speak to people. I'm confident the companies that previously were running meetups will find some sort of alternative where they will probably host stuff online and do Q&As, presentations remotely, and yeah, just listen in. Be engaged on social media as well. So not only seeing what companies are posting, but also actively posting yourself. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail specifically about the recruitment industry, but I can tell you that the people who will be impacted very quickly are going to be recruiters, not companies. Companies will still need to hire developers, but yeah, people aren't going to want to move. That's going to be the problem. And why should I work if I'm a company? Imagine for a second, why should I want to work with a recruiter when I'm pretty confident that they're not going to have people anyway? I can tell you, spend plenty of time on Twitter, LinkedIn, that sort of stuff, but actually post original content, make stuff, talk about how you're making stuff, demonstrate your ability to work remotely with your peers, with your colleagues once you graduated the course, and be realistic about what you work on. Don't take on a 3-week project similar to project phase, but just little things and just practice working remotely using things like GitHub, GitLabs, Trello, Jira, that sort of stuff, and post about it. Obviously, if everyone's going to work at home, they're probably going to spend some more time on Twitter and LinkedIn, so they're more likely to see this content. But I'm telling you now, it's going to be a waste of your time talking to recruiters. What you really need to do is make stuff and then show people you making stuff and support each other as well, right? If you see one of your peers posting about something that they're making on LinkedIn or Twitter, like it, talk to them about it, and I can guarantee you that when you then post something, they will like it back. Or I certainly hope we've created a supportive enough community where people do that. Katie asks, are many companies on a hiring freeze at the moment? So as of last week, the general message coming out of the tech industry was no. A lot of companies were looking and going remote. So Facebook and Google limited any on-site job interviews indefinitely and went just completely remote. But at this point, they are still hiring and interviewing people. I've got some statistics about this sort of stuff, but as of end of last week, half of companies said that coronavirus won't impact hiring beyond in-person interviews. Obviously, this could change very quickly, though. It is a rapidly evolving situation. A couple of companies that we work with, including DAI, which is a company that's had a lot of Northcoders graduates, have said that they're postponing in-person interviews, but they're not stopping hiring. So what I anticipate will probably happen is companies won't stop hiring, but they will delay just for a month, see how things play out, see how maybe things like absenteeism affect the ability to conduct remote interviews with people, and I guess have a process in place about how they're going to interview these people, both technical and on sort of soft skills, and then sort of continue, right? I mean, one of the great things about being developers is remote working or remote working culture is quite established already. And as I was saying, I think a lot of mid and senior level developers aren't going to want to move because all the uncertainty that will happen. These companies are still going to need to hire people to do the job that they need to hire people for in the first place, right? So I think there will be an admission, and I think there will be junior developer roles available 100% remote. There will be some roles there. Maybe you'll have to come in for a couple of weeks when you first join, get familiar with the team, tech stack, ways of doing stuff. So more like using things like Jira, continuous integration, continuous development pipelines, like things like Jenkins, and then probably go remote afterwards. But as soon as once we know something new and how people are going to be doing this, we'll let you know, and we'll also be working closely with our hiring partners to consult and advise on how they can do it. James asks, how big a portfolio do companies expect from a junior developer when they're hiring? Good question. What I would suggest is it's not about quantity, but about quality, right? So I would, again, be realistic about the work that you're doing and the scope of it. I would suggest if you are going to work in a pair or a team remotely on something, bite off something realistic, like, I don't know, like a snake game, and break it up into like little tasks for you to do. Maybe just like something that's going to take a day, 2 days. What people would rather see is you taking on smaller things and completing them than trying to start really big, ambitious things or loads of different things and then not finishing anything. What I would suggest as well is just find the balance between continuing to practice the stuff you've learned at Northcoders and keeping those skills sharp. And again, there's nothing wrong with going away and learning new languages, but if you do, be able to justify what the rationale and let's say business case for those were. As a developer, when you're in a company, going away and learning a new technology takes time, which is a lot of money. Developers are expensive, right? If you're in a company, you say, okay, so we are going to use this brand new language to do this thing, you've got to be able to justify to management why you think that's going to solve the problem better than what you already know, right? So again, being able to say that you've had that critical thought process when you go across your interviews is going to be a massive, massive plus to those companies. I hope that answers your question. Judith asks, so what do these companies say about the impact of the virus? Are they planning on delaying recruitment? Would they hire junior developers to start remotely? Cool. So we brought on a hiring partner only yesterday who's looking to take on a junior. It depends on the organisation. Like I said, no company at this point in time has told us flat out that they're not hiring. Companies have said they're going to postpone in-person interviews, not postpone interviews, period. just because of I think especially the government advice has changed so much within the last few days. It is still a very uncertain time. Um, I'm actually speaking to a company this afternoon about how we can continue doing things like hiring partner presentations. They actually want to sponsor graduation as well. So I'm going to talk to them about that. Just 1 second, okay? I need to set this phone call. You're back in about 10 seconds to answer more questions, okay? Thanks. Good afternoon, Josh speaking. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Cool. I can't see any more questions in the channel. Does anyone have anything else they would like to ask before we call it quits? How are we different if we was apply for remote jobs from companies overseas? For companies overseas, something you'd have to consider if you were going for remote jobs overseas is the exchange rates and obviously the uncertainty in the global economy. If, for example, you're getting paid in dollars and the US dollar ends up taking a big hit, that's obviously going to affect what your take home is at the end of the month. And also, there's going to be things to consider like exchange rates, having an account that money can actually get paid into, among other things as well. Is it something I would advise, especially with the current level of uncertainty and how much the markets are fluctuating? Probably not. Um, but yeah, apart from that, should it be too different from working remotely in a company in the UK? The amount of support and training that you get might not be quite the same because of, well, there might not be, but language barrier. Some to consider as well as time difference as well. My colleague, not my colleague, one of my friends who works as a consultant did some work with a company based in New York, and they had to be available at specific times, US time, because that's what the client works on, for stand-ups and stuff like that as well. So something to consider. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. No worries. All right. Just to sort of emphasize as well, if anyone does have any questions or concerns after this, just feel free to message myself, Steph, Hannah, someone like that. We'd be more than happy to obviously answer any questions that you might have. We do ask, obviously, if anyone does have suspect that they may have it, or has started self-isolating, I say coronavirus, let us know. It'll be completely anonymous, but in terms of, I guess, helping protect the wider community, it's useful for us to know. We'll never obviously say, oh, so and so has this or anything like that. Far from it. It's the last thing we want to do. But yeah, just to really sort of emphasize and drive home the point I was making earlier about actually posting content on places like LinkedIn and Twitter rather than just messaging people who, again, I think the people that are going to struggle the most out of this are the recruiters, not the tech industry. Yeah, make stuff. Show people that you're making stuff. Show people that you're capable of working remotely, and support each other. Right? If you post, share something that I've written, you can be sure to know that I would do the same, and I would hope everyone else would be in a similar position. Interact with Northcoders, interact with other companies as well, and yeah, people. Start building up a picture of what the industry looks like. I'm only one person. I can obviously speak to as many companies as I can. Hiring partners and otherwise, but there will always be companies that I'm maybe not aware of that you are. Speak to them. Talk to them. Tell them that you are. Just don't sell yourself super hard, but just say, I'm about to graduate or recently graduated Northcoders. I want to learn a little bit more about the industry. Can I spend a little bit of time picking your brains? Something like that. Okay, cool. All right, thanks for your time, everyone. Yeah, if anyone does have any questions or anything like that, drop me a direct message. Okay, cheers. All right, bye, everyone. How do I get out of this?